Today, we're going to look at a short video from caregiving.org about the faces of caregiving before we get into the crux of today's programming.
Our culture, at least in my family, is that we care for folks at home. And that's hard.
My values as a Native American, that's one of the values that is instilled in us, is to care for your elders.
I didn't fully understand or embrace what it meant to be a caregiver until way, way, way late.
I don't know that I would have said the word caregiver at the time. And I don't think I even knew the word advocate at the time, but I knew that I was in some special place.
I had somebody who actually approached me and just started asking questions about how I was feeling and what was going on. And I think the light bulb went off, and it's like, oh, you know what? There are other people out there that are feeling the same way that I am.
Kimmy came home from the hospital, and for them, it's, oh, it's done. Well, not really. It actually just began for us, right?
Josh needs 24-hour hands-on care. You can't just sleep, think you're gonna sleep. He needs suctioning constantly. He's on 24-hour feedings. He needs to be turned. He's on an oximeter 24 hours. I mean, it's not like you can just say it's time to go to bed. It's not like that at all.
That's the big challenge for me is, as the caregiver, is I've got someone who's got some very, very serious cancer, who I believe requires 24-hour care.
The services and supports that I was trying to desperately to put in place for her, as soon as I would get a level of service in place for her, she would, her needs would exceed that level of service. So it felt a bit like being on a hamster wheel.
I mean, I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't going to the doctor for myself, surely not. I wasn't taking time for any breaks to restore myself.
I'm physically tired. Sometimes I get overwhelmed. Probably about 3 months ago, I started to get sick.
I had my first anxiety attack, so that was new for me, and that was something I've never experienced before.
We never took a vacation for the 25 years because we never thought it was going to be 25 years, right?
I've struggled with my own mental health, and seeing how my grandpa is kind of puts more weight on me sometimes. And I try to talk about it, and it could be hard sometimes. And I think it's not just me. I know it's not just me. There's lots of other people who are going through that issue.
And I think that really hits home for those of us who have cared for a loved one, who are currently caring for a loved one, who see a future where caring for a loved one is on the horizon. It's powerful to hear these stories, but it's also empowering to know that we're not alone, to know that the challenges we face are not unique to our situation, and that there are others out there in a community of caregivers who face these challenges each and every day. There's a sense of comfort knowing that the community at large is there with us and for us to face these challenges and obstacles, to providing the best care we possibly can to our care partners. As we take a look at the next section of barriers to accessing services and respite, we're going to take a look at how we can articulate our concerns and overcome fears that come along inherently with being promoted to the non-paid role of family caregiver. We're going to find ways to let caregivers use these resources in more user-friendly ways, trying to identify obstacles and barriers, and how can we make it easier for us all to access the available supports and services, or to get supports and services created where those gaps in care currently exist. We're going to address program challenges and what we've seen, and maybe come up with some brainstorming ideas of how we individually have overcome some of those challenges to use these services. And finally, we're going to ask you, what can we do to help you, the community of caregivers here in Arizona? Do you identify as a caregiver? Well, I think that's the first issue we really need to take a look at. And they talked about it in that short video, is first and foremost, have you self-identified yet as a family caregiver? And to talk us through this first point, I would love to go ahead and introduce to you Nanette Salsic. Nanette Salsic works with healthcare systems as an administrator at Raising Special Kids. I would love to turn this portion of the program over to Nanette as she walks us through, do you identify as a caregiver? Nanette?
Thanks, Brandon, so much. Like Brandon mentioned, my name is Nanette. I do work over at Raising Special Kids. I've been over there about 13 years now, providing support to families that have a child or a young adult with disabilities. But honestly, my most important job is I'm a mom to 6 amazing kiddos, and I often joke I'm not sure how that happened. I know how it happens, but I promise I never dreamed we would have so many beautiful kiddos in our family. Our oldest is 22, and then all the way down to our youngest, who's 11. Our lives changed forever when we had our daughter. She's front and center there in the picture. That was born with spina bifida. She has myelomeningocele, which is the worst form. And yeah, things were, I never ever dreamed we'd be there. Nobody ever plans, right? Being there. And I remember, watching that video right now and hearing those folks sharing how they never thought of themselves as a caregiver. I certainly didn't. I just thought, this is my job, right? I'm a mother to these amazing kiddos. I'm there to take care of them. But what I didn't realize was that I wasn't giving myself room to ask for help. And I didn't realize the support that I needed. It was really difficult when Annie entered our world. Our lives were turned upside down. I didn't know how to access resources. I didn't realize how it was going to be 24/7. Like mentioned in the video, coming home from the hospital was not the end. It was just the beginning. And I don't know where I'd be today without the support that I've received. I didn't want to admit being a failure, and that's how I saw it. I thought to myself, I can't do it all, and therefore I'm somehow failing. And I think a lot of caregivers feel that way today. And it's so important that we're able to reach out to them and let them know you are not failing. No one can do this on their own. It's so important to reach out and get the help that you need in order to be there for your loved one and, of course, for yourself. Self-care is really, really important. And I know it sounds really cliche, but it's necessary, because if we don't take care of ourselves, then there's no way that we can be there, for our loved ones. So I think that that's one of the hardest things, realizing that, we do need help. We can't do it on our own. And there's a lot of help out there. However, trying to navigate all these systems, programs, applying for things, it's overwhelming. I was that mom who I knew that, when long-term care and DDD came knocking at the door, I knew that they were there to help, but I didn't want to open the door, right? Because I didn't want to admit that perhaps I hadn't showered in a few days. Perhaps I couldn't stop crying. The house was a disaster. And it was another friend, another parent of a child with special needs that said, they are not there to judge you. They're there to help you. So open the door and let them in. And that made all the difference in the world. So I don't know where we'd be today without the support that I've received at Raising Special Kids. And of course, now it's never felt like a job. It's an absolute passion, being able to help other families through all of this. Now I'd like to introduce Eileen Lawless. Eileen is, she is the specialist for dependent care at Life and Work Connections and at the University of Arizona. Eileen, take it away.
Thank you, Nanette. That's You know, I think it's amazing to be able to be in a place where we can learn from each other and experience our own caregiving journeys and sharing with those who are in them right now and as we proceed in the future. So I'm very grateful for you to share your story and share your experiences and your expertise. So, you know, when we talk about caregiving, so what I do at the University of Arizona is I help our staff and faculty and our students who are caregivers of adults and elders. We also have a specialized program for children and families, but this is more along the line of what I offer. So I think one of the things oftentimes that comes up, and Nanette hit on this before, is when I have a caregiver who comes to see me, and they could be in any type of a caregiving situation. It can be planning ahead, it can be right in the middle of it. But oftentimes the caregiver, the person often feels very, very lonely. You know, that feeling of being left alone, that perhaps I'm the only one who is experiencing this. And just like was said, we want to let people that know that they are absolutely not alone and that we are here to help them no matter what their caregiving situation is. So with that, I think a lot of people feel a sense of being overwhelmed, excuse me. And that feeling of being overwhelmed can be because of diagnosis. It can be because of that they're in the caregiving situation right now and they're so busy. And by the way, I also help with those who are dealing with both life, work, integration, balance, you know, aspects of wellness along with that. So I'm just so overwhelmed. When I go to work, I'm thinking about my loved one. When I go home, I'm thinking about work. And along with that, what we often tend to do is we often tend to think about what we are not doing, and we feel bad about it. And my opportunity is to offer the caregiver the chance to see, what is it that you are doing? You know, and it can be something small, it can be something large. And the bottom line is that we are doing the absolute best we can. And we need to take time and to breathe and to recognize that. So with that being said, you know, we want to make sure that we're aware of that stress level that we're at. We want to make sure that while we're taking care of others, because we know we can't do it alone, that we're taking care of ourselves. So we'll be talking about respite, and we'll be talking about, you know, even sometimes we define respite in different ways. You know, oh, I don't need respite, I'm okay. I can't sleep at night, or I'm up 24 hours a day. But, you know, so these are things that we need to really consider. And then once we get that sense of being overwhelmed down a little bit, we can then think about what steps we want to take. And what I often tell, and what I've often applied to my own self with caregiving, is that we need to get the information, and then we need to define our priorities, and then we can take those steps. Because we know as caregivers that not only are we offering hands-on care, and not only are we on mental, physical, cognitive alert all the time, but there are other things that we have to do, like setting up appointments to the doctor or arranging transportation, all these different things that we have to figure out. So, and I think the other thing is bringing up the point that it's hard to get a diagnosis, or it's hard to find out the information that goes with the diagnosis, whether we are starting as caregivers or whether we've been caregivers and something has changed. So there's an example that's provided by the Arizona Caregiver Coalition where there was a wife and husband, and the husband had a diagnosis of diabetes, but he recently had 3 of his toes amputated. So along with that is hospitalization, wound care, follow-up home care, transportation to see the specialist. So we kind of see all these different things that can change along that route. So we regroup, we take a breath, we see those resources, we reach out to the wonderful agencies and organizations that are present today and in the state of Arizona and nationally, and we take those steps together. And the other thing is, I find a lot of people, no matter where we are at the university, it's hard to define, you know, exactly where to start. And a lot of times I've had family members who have said, I'm afraid to find out. I'm afraid to find out about that diagnosis. Or I'm afraid to find out what's available. I also have a lot of family members who say, I'm not going to be eligible for what's available at the Area Agency on Aging, or I'm not going to be available. But what do you say we find out? What do you say we get the information about those agencies to find out what may be available? And maybe it's something small. It's not quite the answer. It's not the magic wand in our back pockets, but maybe that something small can allow us some respite, can allow us the opportunity to re-energize and rejuvenate. So I mentioned before that we have a lot of different situations where we're left alone, or we have too much paperwork. And with that too much paperwork, we have those additional responsibilities. So for example, we have medical responsibilities. Maybe we've also gotten into some issues relating to legal considerations, financial considerations. We talked before about Medicare coverage. How does that relate to, say, for example, if my doctor just talked to me about the possibility of palliative care and hospice? How does that work? How does that work with Altex? So once again, we are working together to energize you to figure out, get that information, define those priorities, and take those steps, and not let that sense of overwhelm stunt our growth and stunt those steps that we need to take. Yeah, so and I think that's essentially it, unless there are any questions. And I want to also say there are a lot of caregivers here today. We are personal, we are professional, and we're both. I honor you, just as I honor the caregivers who come to me at the University of Arizona, and I'm grateful to be here today. So I'm not sure if we have any questions, but I can take a look and see.
Eileen, this is Daryl, and there was a comment in the chat. It says, hi, I'm Christine, caregiver for my 46-year-old son who suffers from high-level cervical spinal cord injury, quadriplegia, and severe neurogenic pain. He requires 24/7 care. We've searched 3 years and failed to find him a reliable caregiver. The issue, outside caregivers are not paid a living wage through agencies, Medicare, and Altex. Want to comment at all?
I guess my comment is wow, and I think everyone else who's present here today is using that term wow as well. And I think that with that, even as we have that sense of care, payment, and I think everyone would probably, who's present today, would want to, after this discussion today, go out and have a cup of coffee and talk about this. Because yes, we do have the reality of finding the right caregiver. We do have the reality of turnover and issues facing home care agencies and senior communities. So that is the reality. And then we have that additional layer of COVID. So I think that what we can do is maybe just, again, regroup. Can we call upon the Arizona Caregiving Coalition? Can we call upon the local agency on aging and see what may be available at this time? And with Altex, I've really enjoyed talking with the case managers, or the case managers, to see what it is that we can do to make sure that we're absolutely looking at this caregiving situation. Do we have all of our bases covered? And what steps can we take from there? And I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in on that, or any of the speakers, Nanette or Brandon or anybody else.
Yeah, I wanted to add, one of the things that I forgot to mention is that a lot of caregivers are finding themselves in a situation where they're in the sandwich generation, right? And that's me. So we have our parents that we're caring for that are aging, and at the same time, we might have a child or a young adult that was born with a disability. So it's really difficult when the state decided, that it's such an honor to be able to get paid to be our daughter's caregiver. But the reality is that I work a full-time job as well. So sometimes needing to find those caregivers outside of, it being me, that's where the real struggle is, like Christine was mentioning. And it's hard. Yeah, the pay is not, you're not going to get rich on being it. It is truly, truly difficult work. And I think all our caregivers are just so, I don't know, we'd be lost without them. So there are agencies, those that can really help us to find good caregivers. And I do encourage everyone that's really struggling to reach out to us at the Arizona Caregiver Coalition, because we can help with that process.
Thank you so much, Nanette, Eileen. The information that you shared with us today is incredibly invaluable, because as we take a look at those two topics, are you identifying as a family caregiver and not knowing where to start? There's a lot right there when you begin this process of being a family caregiver. And why is it important to self-identify as a family caregiver? Well, the research shows us that if you do not self-identify as a family caregiver, you're much less likely to access and look for resources to help support you and your loved ones. So it's a critical step in that process of becoming a family caregiver is to self-identify as soon as possible in that process that I am a family caregiver. When we took a look at that definition, the definition of a family caregiver can be very broad and very varied. You can be a family caregiver that lives 15 states away. You can be a family caregiver to where you're involved in 24/7 care of your loved one. But on both ends of that spectrum, you're still a family caregiver, still trying to access supports and services to make sure that your loved one has the highest quality of life possible. And that's incredibly important that we start looking for those supports and services as early in the caregiving process as possible. Because when we took a look at the section that Eileen talks about of not knowing where to start, oftentimes it's because family caregivers will wait until they're in crisis mode before they start. They don't start looking for the supports and services and doing the research on what's available to make sure that my loved one can remain active and engaged in place for as long as possible until the very real reality of, I can't do this by myself anymore hits. And quite frankly, they can't do that by themselves anymore probably happened a long time before they actually became self-aware of that. So what can we do to get supports and services into the homes faster? A lot of that starts with us as the family caregivers, being able to say, I am a family caregiver, and it's okay to ask for help. Being overwhelmed is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that maybe it's time I start utilizing some of those tools in my tool belt that I've been ignoring for a while. And when we take a look at the issues related to the caregiver shortage within the state of Arizona and nationwide, this is a well-known problem that the Department of Labor has been tracking since 2014. So 8 years into this issue, this problem continues to snowball as the caregiving demographic continues to grow year in and year out. I will tell you that there is hope on the horizon. The Division of Aging and Adult Services through the Department of Economic Security in the state of Arizona has put resources towards incentive programs for the agencies to try to incentivize individuals to become direct care workers and to keep them on staff longer as direct care workers, hopefully increasing the overall size of the workforce and the skill level of the workforce by not having a constant turnover rate of the direct care workers within those agencies. We look forward to the improvements to come. Obviously, that's not a light switch that turns on instantly. It's something that will take time to develop, but it is something that we're aware of on a state level, and it is something that the stakeholders are actively engaged in trying to address. That should at least give us a little bit of hope on the horizon that this problem will ease over time and that we will continue to get more caregivers in the agencies and more quality caregivers into our homes to provide us with a respite break. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next section, which is the feeling of responsibility, the feeling that nobody else can do this. I have to do this as the child, as the spouse, as the parent, as the trusted care partner. This is my role. Nobody else's, it's mine. And remember that when we take that burden upon ourselves, we begin to start ignoring some of the other supports and services, the tools in our tool belt, so to speak, as family caregivers, until it can become too late, until we're overwhelmed, until the stress has become so high that we're at risk of caregiver burnout. And now all of a sudden, our emotions and our mental and physical well-being will begin to suffer. And now we can become the individual that is in need of care rather than our care partner. Remember, There are going to be changes to your familial relationships when you become a family caregiver. And oftentimes, those are some of the most challenging obstacles to overcome. When an adult child is now caring for an aging parent, that role reversal can be very difficult for both parties to accept and to allow for that relationship to prosper in positive ways. We can see our loved ones respond to us in ways that maybe we're not used to. They may show us the worst of themselves instead of the best of themselves. And what we have to understand here is that it's not about you, it's not about the care you're providing. It's about the fact that this is empowerment in many ways. They've lost their ability to make decisions on their own the way they're used to. Your loved ones have lost the power to do what they want, when they want, how they want, and those feelings are new to them because they've lived this entire life as an incredibly powerful and independent being. And now they're seeing that change. And now maybe this loved one who they used to care for is now tasked for caring with them. And that can be a very difficult understanding to come to. Know that it's not a unique challenge. And it's one that I'm sure many of us on today's event have experienced or are actively experiencing. And I will tell you this, that it can be a challenge, but it can be a blessing. The opportunity to give back to individuals who have given so much to you in your life is an incredible opportunity that some of us don't get. To be selfless in the way we spend our time, to be selfless in the way we spend our energy and resources is an incredible gift that sometimes we lose when they're in the midst of the challenges of caregiving. So I come alongside of you and say that I understand that this changing dynamic within the relationship is difficult. It can be a challenge and it can be a struggle. But talk to your loved one about it. Communicate with them about what you're going through, about what your feelings are, about what they're going through, and about what their feelings are. And being aware of each other's feelings will help really tamp down a lot of the anxiety and hopefully eliminate any kind of feelings of resentment that come across through either the care partner or the care recipient. It's very important that we remember that our emotions are there for a reason. They're not bad. We don't need to push them aside. If we're feeling frustrated, that's okay. It's our body telling us that maybe we need a break. Maybe some of those tools in our tool belt, using that respite care, taking up that neighbor who offered to come over and give you that little break so you can just slip into the next room and get that 30 to 45-minute cat nap that you so desperately need because your sleep is so horribly interrupted. Changes are coming. It's a fact. And the changing dynamics can be very challenging to navigate. But if we keep an open dialogue and an open communication and going into at least aware that these challenges exist, the hope is that they won't be so shocking to us as family caregivers and the care partners when they do arise, because we have a certain level of understanding and expectation that this is normal, this is okay, and I have tools to be able to help me overcome these different challenges. If you have any questions right now, or you have any short stories that you would like to share with me, I would like to open up the floor to the attendees today to talk about this feeling that as a family caregiver, it's my responsibility and nobody else can, or maybe even should be doing this role because somehow I'm a failure or somehow I'm less than what I should be because I'm not fulfilling this role 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'd love to hear from you at this point.
Brandon, while we wait for folks to type in the chat if they have some more comments, one of the things that you touched upon really hit home, and that was how sometimes those that we're caring for are not giving us their best version of themselves, right? So it's really hard when I have to admit I can't do it all. I need to get another caregiver. And our daughter is saying, no, I only want you. I don't want anybody else. And I think that's a real challenge that a lot of us face. And we have to know when we do need to accept that help, despite the fact that our loved one might not be happy with it, right?
Absolutely. And thank you so much. I know that this can be a very challenging area, the changing dynamics and the feeling of personal responsibility as a caregiver. But remember this, The general contractor who is tasked with building your home is not the person who is doing every single part of building that home. Look at yourself as a family caregiver, as a general contractor who is overseeing the project of caring for your loved one. Now, you may have subcontractors that need to come into the home to provide some of those services. You may have a plumber come in to do the plumbing and an electrician to come in to do the electrical. Remember that you, as the project manager for your loved one, may need to bring in other outside organizations or care partners to help you in this project of care. Do not feel lesser. Do not feel somehow as though you're shirking your responsibilities. You're not. It's okay to use that hammer in your tool belt to bang in those nails. You are not required to bang in every single nail with your forehead. So let's use the tools that we have in our tool belts as family caregivers and explore the ways that we can feel comfortable as family caregivers to access those supports and services and not feel like somehow we're lesser as individuals because we have utilized those supports and services.